Welcome to episode 47 of the BioBalance Healthcast. I'm Dr. Kathy Maupin.
And I'm Brett Newcomb, and today we're talking about sex. Kathy and I were contacted and asked for information to contribute to somebody that's writing an article for Ebony Magazine about what's normal in terms of sexual behavior and how do you deal with it when there is an imbalance in desire for sex. Yes. Where does that come from? Are there medical reasons? Are there sociological, psychological reasons for all of that? And so we thought we'd spend some time today talking about the information that we're going to send to the author of the article for Ebony Magazine.
And we have two different points of view. My point of view is more medical and physical, and your point of view is more social and psychological.
Absolutely.
And after years of counseling families and
yes,
couples.
I've been in private practice now for 30 years as a family therapist, and a lot of what I have talked to families about has to do with sex in their marriage, desire in their marriage, communication about sex and desire in their marriage. People come to sexual behavior in marriage from such different backgrounds, such different perspectives. I mean, some people come thinking that it's something dirty. Some people come thinking that the only legitimate reason to have sex is for procreation.
Right.
That it's not for entertainment, it's not for joy, it's not
for bonding.
Bonding, it's for reproduction. Some people come with biological systems that are more intensely focused sexually than others.
People who have more testosterone from the beginning
have
more sexual drive.
Or if they're taking antidepressant.
Or birth control pills.
And it suppresses their sexual desire. And so what happens is that sometimes for couples who start off with a bang, they evolve to a place where there's no bang.
And this is even before they go through the 40s.
Exactly.
And 50s,
I mean, it can happen at any age. And so what I see in terms of the relationships, and what I talk to them about in terms of the relationships, is that you have got to have communication. Because one of the things, if we don't talk about it, I'm going to assume negatives. I'm going to assume that you don't like me, and it's because I'm overweight, or because I'm old, or because I, crunch ice when I chew, or whatever it may be, and I'm going to try to apply that and make modifications in my behavior without ever checking with you to see, is that real? Is that what's really going on?
Or wives often are like, if you just take a shower before we have sex.
Yes, and
I'm
not talk about
doing it. If I'm not doing it, if he comes home from work and wants to do that.
Yeah, or why didn't he brush his teeth?
Right,
Yeah,
right. It can be as simple as that. And those are the hardest things to talk about. I mean, to talk to your spouse, the reason it's hard, I think, is because there's a big price if it doesn't work.
Well, there's a thing that I teach in my classes for people. I teach at the university for people that want to become therapists. And one of the things that we talk about is something called the social process commentary taboo. There is a taboo that we train our children with. We say, don't ever do that. Like looking, you take a small child out to a grocery store or something, and they see somebody with a handicap, and we say, don't stare, don't make comments. They'll say, well, why is that person that way? I remember when my oldest child was young, and his grandmother had come to visit, and she was getting ready to leave, and she said, give me a kiss. And he said, no. And we're like, well, give Grandma a kiss. And he's like, no. And somebody said, well, why not? And he said, because her breath stinks. And everybody froze.
Oh, that was fun.
Yeah, well, she was a smoker, and it did. And but that's not a thing we talk about.
Yeah, it's not
well, if you're married to
acceptable.
somebody, you have to find a way to talk about that. If your breath bothers me, then without it being an assault or an insult, I have to be able to say, I'm having a problem with that. Would you help me?
And unfortunately, most of those comments come out when you're in a fight.
Yeah.
They just kind of flood out from your anger, and that's really not the way to tell somebody that you don't like their breath or their snoring or their whatever.
And so those are things that happen in everybody's life. We want to focus specifically on the sexual components of that and sexual communication. I ask couples all the time, do you talk when you're having sex? Do you talk about what you want? Do you talk about your fantasies? Do you acknowledge that you even have fantasies? And do you share them? I think those are critical components of the communication process. But even more critical a component is, how do you talk about what satisfies me, or that I'm not satisfied, I want more in terms of this behavior, that behavior, frequency, whatever, without having it be an assault or an insult or complaint. It's not a criticism. I'm not
so how do you do that?
critiquing you. You know, it's really, really difficult. And, and part of what I try to do is get people to just come into the room with the reality of the question. When there's something that's out of whack for me, do I stuff it? Do I hide it? Or do I learn to talk to you and say, some part of this isn't working for me. I'm not sure exactly what it is. I'm not saying it's you. I'm just saying it's not working. Can we talk about it? Can we experiment? Can we try something different? Maybe a different place.
Yeah.
Maybe a different position, maybe a different activity, maybe a different
A lot of people come to me after they've gone to you and they've talked about it and it's still not right.
And that's really important to say, because it's not always that as a cause. So sometimes there are medical reasons.
Yeah, there are reasons when oftentimes women who have been told sex is bad, they don't have to have been abused to have this, but vaginismus is something that where they inadvertently contract their vagina and they can't have sex
Because it's forbidden. They're not supposed to.
right,
So
but
you
so
can't
their
get
body
penetration.
follows their mind.
Yes.
And so that is a huge issue, and it takes physical therapy, and it takes using dilators, and it takes getting comfortable with that area of your body when you're somebody who is afraid of sex and is afraid of that or been told it's bad.
So those fundamental messages are so ingrained and so reflexive that even if you say, well, I love this guy and I want to be with this guy, your body won't let that happen.
Right.
Wow.
And you have to, I mean, now is the time to talk to people about how they talk to their children.
Yes.
By saying sex is terrible and not a gift from God that binds two people together and is a wonderful communication, then we're giving our children the wrong message. We're telling them something that is going to then ruin their marriages in the future if they actually embrace it. Some children aren't listening, but lots of children are.
And that's a family responsibility. It's something that in our society schools also attempt to do, but it's so politically challenging and religiously challenging for schools to try to teach it, even though most of the community will say, well, there's a certain base of information that needs to be available, and school is a fine place to teach it, but we want to know what are they teaching and who's teaching it. You have some pervert up there telling my daughter or son that they need to be behaving this way. It's a complex problem. And what I would say is that families need to talk to their children about things sexual. Yes. And especially about information. You can teach the biology of the mechanical parts of the body, but you don't teach how to nurture somebody, how to listen to somebody, how to love somebody, how to attend to somebody when you're trying to communicate with them on that channel.
Many women talk to me about the fact that once they're having sex, and then it's very dissatisfying because their husband's disconnected. Their husband's not like attending to them, they're somewhere else.
Right.
And that to a woman is a kill.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's not what they're perceiving sex as.
Right.
They're perceiving it as a bonding, and he's somewhere else in his head. And that's not real sex.
He's pretending that he's in the video that he watched.
Right, or something like that, God forbid. I mean, that's not even, I'm not trying to.
Guys that are honest will sometimes say, well, that's what I do. I facilitate myself with her. I'm not really having connection to her.
Right, and that doesn't work in a marriage
No.
or in any relationship. But my job is to make sure there's nothing physically wrong with either man or woman, and then to make sure once the physical is fixed, in my world, I make sure they don't have stage fright, because either one of them can have stage fright, because one of them is functioning, and then the other one should be functioning, has normal testosterone levels, and is physically normal, and then just can't function. It could be male, it could be the male or the female, but that's because the other partner's going, why can't you do this? I mean, that's not a good way to get sex.
Classically, power weapons in relationships have been money and sex.
Right.
And so access to money and access to sex as a reward for satisfaction. If I'm pleased with you, if things are going well for me, then I'm more open and receptive to spending money or having sex than if I'm not. And classically, women will say, I'm not in the mood. And they make jokes about men always being in the mood. But actually, oftentimes men are not in the mood either because they're angry or they're hurt.
Well, and they have a lot more obvious, women can fake it and men can't. Yes. I mean, really. I mean, women
so
can
I'm
say.
Told.
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that brings us to a point that I wanted to touch on too. A lot of women are anorgasmic when they come to see you. And there are sometimes physical reasons for that, sometimes psychological reasons for that. But you've talked about that in previous podcasts, and you can do some things to help with that. But we go back to the communication and the information. There are different ways that women have orgasms. They can have clitoral orgasm, vaginal orgasm, anal orgasm. But whatever works for a particular woman, she's got to be able to communicate that to her man to say, these are the things.
Because he's not going to read your mind.
And
and
he's not necessarily going to notice.
Yeah, and he's somewhere else. We're very not. This isn't everybody, but in general, what women tell me is that we're very centrally located. Right at the moment, we're right there, and men tend to be. They don't remember what happened. They don't remember what they did. They're not going to learn a lesson at that time about what makes you happy, really.
They're pretty focused at that point.
Yeah, but their brain is just on having an orgasm generally.
Well, that's particularly true for younger men. As men age, they begin to become available for more of a focus on intimacy and less of a focus on orgasm. It's not about get on and get off. It's about having a connection and a relationship that is satisfying. And one of the things that men discover with some surprise is that sometimes they have sex and they don't have orgasm, which frightens them. It's like, oh my God, that's never happened to me before. Is something wrong?
And that's very normal.
And that's very normal. But again, you have to teach them that, and you have to ask them to embrace the refocusing into a focus on intimacy and mutual connectedness rather than on the bottom line.
The women that come to me that are anorgasmic, I started to put that on my interview sheet because no one would tell me that without my asking that. And when I ask that, have you ever, or do you now have orgasms, or do you have orgasms with sex, or just by yourself? Because oftentimes women can stimulate themselves. They know where everything is.
And yet I've talked to women who tell me they won't do that, don't do that because they're ashamed, or religiously they've been told it's forbidden.
Right.
And
That's
so
right.
that limits their
options. And that limits my options in teaching them how, first you have to teach yourself how to be orgasmic. Then you have to teach your husband
how to share the gift.
How to make you orgasmic. But frankly, most of the women that come to me start off with no testosterone. So they're not going to be orgasmic.
Yeah.
But when they get the testosterone, it's possible.
Okay.
And most people are orgasmic after they've been treated. So happily, they go, that's what that is. I wondered what it was going to be like, and they're 50 years old.
And that's really sad.
Yeah, it is.
But it is happy that
it's
finally,
happy that they get it back. There's another half of their life.
This is such a complicated topic, and it's such an intense part of what we both do professionally that we'll probably have other conversations about it. But if you have specific questions about this or any of the other topics that are available on our podcast, you can contact us directly at podcast@biobalancehealth.com. You can read my blog about some of these issues at brettnewcomb.com.
And if you want more information about bioidentical hormone pellets and my treatment, visit biobalancehealth.com or call my office at 314-993-0963.
Thank you for visiting with us today.